Thank you everyone for making time to join us this morning. I'm really sorry we had to cancel this session from last week. Actually, both myself and my dear guest, Penelope, both of us were really under the weather. In fact, Penelope, hi Penelope, good morning. I had lost my voice and Penelope was on the way to losing hers. And we all thought, could it be C19? But it's not, it was not C19. So I'm very happy that all of you came back and joined us this morning. I think the topic that we're going to talk about is really current, and it's really something that's on many of our minds. And actually, in fact, if it's not on your mind, it had better be very, very soon. So everybody say hi to Penelope, my partner in crime for this morning. Hi, Penelope, good morning.
Hello, hi everyone.
Yeah, and we have one more guest with us, and it would be Christopher from AAMS. Now, AAMS and Mediacorp are collaborating on a series of 6 really, I think, insightful webinars that are coming up. So keep your eye out. And all of you, please stay to the very end because Christopher has a little gift for all of us that he will share. So this is the first Executive Insights webinar for 2022. In fact, we've been on air for the last 2 years now, and very happy that we're here to just kick the year off in the right way. And let's go to the next slide, just so that all of you know what AAMS is. AAMS is really a merger of 2 very established ad marcom excellence associations in town. So this happened in November of 2019. And since then, many of us get together. I serve on the ExCo of AAMS alongside some of the, the luminaries in the industry in Singapore. So we collaborate with AAMS, and we're putting out a whole series of webinars. But at the same time, I encourage all of you to check out AAMS and in fact, join us. And because this is a great networking platform for many of you who would be here this morning. Okay, so we will come back to Christopher a little bit later on. He will share something with us at the very end of the presentation. And let's start this presentation. Could I get all of you to help Penelope and myself know all of you a little bit better through answering 2 poll questions? My first poll question is, has the pandemic caused your marketing to shift towards omnichannel? Now, it's either yes, no, and it's absolutely fine to say, hey, Dasheng, I don't know what you're talking about, and that's why I'm here. So could all of you respond to the poll that you would have seen pop up on your screen? And then we will see what this room is all about. Penelope, what do you think?
I don't know. I want to say I'm going to get a lot of probably the third answer.
Third answer? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think our audience tends to be quite hardcore, so I think we'll get a lot of the first answer.
Yeah, maybe I'm hoping for a third answer.
Okay, good. Okay, so great.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah. So, what we've actually found is that people who attend our webinars are usually at the forefront of what they do. And they've actually found Executive Insights to be a great platform to keep them at the forefront. So I'm very happy that many of you have shifted to omnichannel. You know the importance. And I think Penelope is going to give more insight on that and how you can make your approach better. I'm going to share a couple case studies that we've done, and hopefully all of that is going to be a source of great inspiration to you. Now, for everyone who answered the third answer, welcome to this webinar. I think it's going to be eye-opening, and I think it's going to give you new pathways to success. My next question is, now for those of you who have embarked on omnichannel, I'm sure you face challenges. So Penelope and I would like to know, what are these challenges that you face? We've listed 4 of the most common. Hopefully they resonate with you. Let's see what this room says. Okay, a couple more seconds and we'll have an answer. I'm going to bet it's got to do with data, Penelope.
I mean, you haven't been wrong so far.
We'll see. Oh, okay. It's quite an even split. Yeah. So defining the customer experience, translating targets, determining optimal media mix, measuring effectiveness and performance. Actually, you know what? We put all these four choices up because I think this webinar in the next 40 minutes or so is going to address each of these and give you guys solutions or potential solutions or ways of thinking about each of these challenges. So thank you so much for participating in our poll. Let's get this off, and let me kick it off with my first slide. Okay. Now, needless to say, I think all our lives have changed with COVID-19. The last 2 years has seen this tremendous evolution of how we live our lives and how we think about our lives. I mean, in fact, for Mediacorp, you know, although we say 50% of people have gone back to the office, we have officially adopted a hybrid work arrangement where we choose whether we work at home or we work in office as and when we need to. And that's a major change. I mean, that's a quantum leap into the future, right? So while all this has happened, it's really happened because we've been able to digitize much of what we do. I mean, imagine this. In the past, we would have to get all of you into a room. You couldn't be enjoying this from the comfort of your study or your living room, your dining room, and you would have to take transport out, come listen to us. But happy to note that, you know, we've got a couple hundred of you in the room this morning who've RSVP'd, you know, and who can join us at your convenience. So digitization is really what has happened, and it's all happened in just 1 year. Now, what our partners tell us is that now this digitization brings with it an interesting challenge. Next. Now, there's this risk of fragmentation. And for marketers like all of us in this room, you know, it is about your message being caught in something called a filter bubble or an echo chamber. So what you end up doing, and our partners have told us, they end up seeing that their message reach hasn't really grown, right? They keep targeting the same people over and over again. So they built up a lot of frequency, but they've not really grown their reach and hence the size of their businesses. So this is something that has come to us all the time. And this is really because of this great thing called targeting. But at the same time, if your marketing relies quite heavily on digital, this is something that you should already be seeing happening. Okay, so next slide. So why is this? Because honestly, human beings have become actually very, very complex in terms of their exposure to media. Now, with mobile devices, etc., our exposure to different types of media has multiplied through a span of a day. So as a result, although I say here that the audience has become less tolerant of siloed communications, I think what I'm really saying is that if your communications is siloed, your audience isn't going to get the full onslaught of what you need to tell them. And a smaller group and, you know, an increasingly smaller and smaller group of that audience is going to get your message, right? So what we're advocating here and what you'll hear from Penelope is the need to really orchestrate this consistent message across multiple touch points. And why these multiple touch points? Next slide. Now, this is sort of our Bible at Mediacorp and where we live in. So while all of you say, well, you know, Mediacorp is, you know, a media company, a media network. In fact, we are actually a factory. We manufacture a product, and that product for the audience is content. So even we, in that product that we manufacture, have to take an omni-channel approach to reaching that audience. In the past, clearly, everyone would sit in front of their TVs at 8 p.m. after dinner and watch primetime TV. That's no longer the case. Mom and dad might, grandma might, you know, maybe the kiddos might, but somewhere in between, you've got, you know, the millennials and the Gen Z who are probably in their rooms, on their laptops, on their iPads, on their mobile devices, catching up with work, talking with your friends, getting on social. So really the entire landscape has changed. And so what we've done is taken an omni-channel approach to delivering that product to the audience, right? So what we're talking about today is something that we already do. I mean, I think many of you would enjoy our content on MeWatch. Some of you would be enjoying our content on an online platform, on YouTube even, right? So why? Because at 8 a.m., we get up, we go to work, we're listening to the radio, we're browsing social media. By noontime, we're reading the news, articles, we're consuming entertainment on the desktop during our lunch break. By 6 p.m., on our way out from work, we're listening to radio. By the time we get home, we're engaging with these large format screens. Now, what you see here really is a heat map of how we're seeing traffic ebb and flow through our network through the day. We see the surge in the morning, we see the surge at lunchtime, we see the surge at 8 p.m. and then at 7 p.m. Now, as a result of COVID and the fact that more people are on hybrid arrangements or working from home, we're seeing the peaks and the troughs actually flatten out. So there is more of a consistent curve throughout the day. Now, that in itself, lends to those of us who are thinking more critically about this, more opportunities to reach our audience in a different way. Okay, so the next slide shows that how we're thinking about this, which is that you have mainstream media in your content, and most people will look at this as it's trusted, it's social responsible, it's relatable. On top of that, we layer a social and digital media layer, which increases your ability to interact and measure the effect of that message that you're sending out. And together, we orchestrate it into this authentic experience for the audience, right? And I think Penelope is going to talk more about this. Now, I'm looking down all the time because I'm also checking the chat box and the Q&A box, and I don't see any action there. So please, I encourage all of you, as we're sharing, to just go ahead and drop your questions in, because we want to make this as conversational as possible on this virtual platform. And in fact, as you're dropping your questions, and I'll be looking at them, and somewhere in between Penelope's presentation, I might throw her a question or two. Let's see how we can destabilize Penelope or leverage on what she has to say, and that's always a lot of fun. So I encourage all of you to do that. But at this stage, let's go on to my next slide. And I want to say, omnichannel is the buzz. It's not new. I think many of us have been taking our fledgling steps in it. Mediacorp, we're deep in this omnichannel pool. As you will see in Penelope's research, many of the companies that she deals with are already on an omnichannel push. But let's just kind of define what this is and define what needs to be done, define the criticalities that need to be looked at. And at this stage, I invite Penelope. Penelope comes from a company called R3, which who I, in my career, has had the good fortune of working with several times. And they are, I would say, golden in our ad marcom industry in Singapore. They're well renowned as prominent thought leaders. So over to you. And with that setup, over to you, Penelope.
Thanks so much, Dasheng. And exactly, I think I would love to hear the questions. I see one has already come through. So keep them coming, and we'd like to have this as a conversation rather than a lecture, because we all know it's Tuesday morning and you guys have definitely important things to do. So we want this as engaging as possible. So just going off to the next slide. A quick introduction. Dasheng was just way too kind to talk about R3 that way, but we are really an independent consultancy, actually founded in Singapore, but now global. And we really, and a lot of people ask us, what are those 3 R's about? And it's really the return on agencies. So how we work with actually marketers to find their best agencies or the optimal agency for them, how we actually help them maintain those relationships. We're also about return on media, so ensuring that there is professional and independent analysis, and that's where we are very, very clear that we stand for independence. We also have reliance on not just external benchmarks, but internal benchmarks. We have a large pool of data that we have from actually working with some of the top clients in the world. We work with actually 12 of the top 20, and everyone's data is kept extremely safe, as well as we have NDAs that cover everyone. And we are also about the return on investment, because I think everyone at the end of the day is in this for business. And the realities of business are that there must be some sort of return on investment. So how do we actually use any bespoke or proprietary methodology, use our internal benchmarks, use industry baselines and best practice to actually advise on how to be able to arrive at that? So that in a nutshell is what we are, R3, and I'm currently a consultant with R3. So moving on to actually the important and interesting thing for today is really about our omnichannel existence and navigating that landscape. So I think most of you have polled to say that you're actually aware of this and you've already embarked on that journey. So I think you're mostly very familiar that the big difference between multi-channel and omnichannel, and one that we're actually going to pull out and just address here at the start, is there is a big difference. And while both actually are characterized by using across the board as many channels as is necessary for your plan, the big thing and the big difference that we see and that we want to emphasize, and we'll talk about this throughout this whole morning, will be the consumer is at the heart of this. And that is where most brands that are successful at this really ensure that throughout the entire journey with their consumer, they keep the consumer at the heart of everything that is being designed or deployed. So creating really that consistent customer experience is the crux of an omnichannel experience. It must be customer focused, there must be engagement, and it's less channel focused, but it doesn't mean that you should ignore the channels or not use them. Big difference, I think, when we really talk about how it is deployed mostly is, you're not really looking at increasing the reach just as a function of volume. You're not looking at only just increasing followers and likes and shares, even though those are important to do. What you're looking at is maximizing how the consumers come into contact with your brand. How do they actually interact with your brand is what we want to actually address as part of omnichannel. It's not to say that you do not also rely and measure all of these channels individually, but what really elevates a brand from going from a multi-channel approach to an omni-channel approach is where you start to leave the advertiser at the heart of it and you start to put the consumer at the heart of it. And we'll go on to the next slide. So I think a big question that most clients that we work with and most advertisers actually embarking on the omnichannel journey ask is really where to start. And I would say actually just very, very candidly, there's no bad place to start. And we would almost just say you just have to start. It's something which I think as we increasingly see polls and we increasingly see data coming out about how shoppers are changing their shopping behavior, how they're actually interacting with brand messaging as well as with brands. You'll see on the right-hand side of the slide where US shoppers and retailers were polled. And again, I don't think most of you are going to be surprised because this is how our own behavior has started to evolve. So how many channels do actually shoppers use to not just interact with their brands that they are purchasing from, but also do that final purchase? And we are seeing an overwhelming number of about 3/4, so 73% of customers used actually multiple channels throughout their shopping journey. So is it enough to stop at a multi-channel approach while being able to do this? The reality is, if you're starting out, yes, having those multiple channels will give you that benefit of having more consumers interacting with you and consumers being able to do that. But the reality that we are seeing is that, again, like Dasheng pointed out in his slides, consumers are becoming so sophisticated, and our own expectations of how we interact with everything, especially post-COVID, is the expectation of our online and offline existence to become a lot more seamless. We're expecting that anything that we start to transact on or start to find information about online or offline is translated to any other touch point that we might visit or we might interact with an advertiser or brand. So I think one of the questions actually I see in the chat really, and this is a great place probably to address it, is has omnichannel changed pre and post COVID? I think Dasheng actually presented a really great point about, and Mediacorp definitely understands their consumer and their consumer journey very well. And you're seeing a flattened out curve. What we are also seeing on when we look at media trends, when we look at what clients are also seeing in performance, yes, it has changed. It has. The change was already starting to happen with the adoption of a lot more multi-channel approaches. But with COVID, an omni-channel approach has started to become very important. And brands have, while they had started before COVID, have accelerated and has catalyzed probably adoption of a full omni-channel approach or a lot more fleshed out multi-channel approach. Yeah. So Penelope, yes, we are definitely seeing.
Yeah, Penelope, just to share, it's very interesting that the numbers that you present here, and I'm looking at the number of 73% of customers use multiple channels throughout their shopping journey. The most interesting thing is, let's say if I look at Mediacorp's very large partner base, that means clients, who use the Mediacorp network, that number mirrors the brands and the companies who use Mediacorp in an omni-channel manner. Or, okay, in a multi-channel manner, but clearly you have to start at multi-channel and then go omni-channel, right? So I just wanted to just pull our eyes to a question by Catherine. Catherine asked, how do this, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, how do the Singapore stats compare to what you're sharing here? Are they reflective or?
Yes, they are consistent. It's just that
are the stats reflective of Singapore as well?
Yes. So what we are seeing initially is we don't have as much sample size. This was a really large survey of 46,000 people. But in Singapore, what we are seeing in either individual client surveys or smaller bespoke data is, yes, we're seeing similar, very consistent results of consumers using more than one channel to interact with a brand. And about 3/4 is very consistent across the board. Where we start to see Singapore might actually differ is we are extremely connected, and we actually have very high rates of digital adoption. So sometimes we might actually sometimes see slightly higher rates in Singapore because we have 4G, 5G, and it's easy to transact, and people feel safe making online purchases. Yep. So yeah, those are great points, and I think very important to start. And I think what we also want to always tell people is you have to start at multi-channel. You have to start somewhere and look across channels, because the moment you add additional channels to your media mix, you will always get an increased reach. You will get increased results of consumers being able to not just be exposed to your message, but having the opportunity at different times in their day, in their lives, when they're on different devices in different places, to be able to interact and have that opportunity to interact with your brand. So really, is it content first or tech first is the next questions that we typically get asked. And I would say, no, there is no one good answer. There is no perfect answer. We would always say, whatever you can do, we would always emphasize that you should start to do, because it is not too late for those who haven't started on an omnichannel journey. It is never too late to start, but you have to address all these questions. But the order themselves is maybe not as critical. I think it becomes very intimidating when brands start to consider, I'm going to have to make these large investments in technology. So then in those cases, then really look at investigating and looking and maybe answering these 5 questions first will help guide and prioritize what you as a brand are able to embark on first and how you can actually start off. So how can I ensure that my brand's shopping experience is convenient? Because humans are really, while a lot of our environment and technology has changed, human nature itself hasn't changed that much, and most humans value and enjoy convenience. So how can you make your brand, and by putting really really making sure that you put your consumer at the heart of it and consider what they might think is convenient. Is your brand messaging or branding consistent? Are you seen the same way across the various touch points? Just making sure that there's that consistency also is something which might not be a large investment, but it's something that shows a consumer that you are thinking about your brand and you're thoughtful about how they are receiving this information. Being relevant. Of course, while a lot of times we're very passionate about products, we know what we're selling, and we want everyone to enjoy or be really informed about what is the detail of what makes our product so great. But a lot of times, I think what we need to remember is, does the consumer find that information relevant, and making sure that is the first thing which they see. Of course, and then empowering customers with the best purchasing decisions. So things that might seem small, like if it's a stock level, showing when a product is, you carry that product, or you might be out of stock of a certain size right now, showing that little, 7 pieces left. Again, all of us have gone to a website when it's on sale, right? And you've all gone, oh my goodness, there's 2 pieces left. I might need to buy this now. I can't wait. Those are things which actually, it might be small, but they enable a consumer to make a decision. And of course, the last one is just being agile and be able to adapt to incorporate any sort of advances or changes where possible. So build things such that they are scalable, or know that this space is so dynamic that it is going to change, and be willing to make those adjustments as you go. So it's all not
Penelope, actually, on your last point, I think very often people think about, oh, in order to go omnichannel, I'll need a new system, I'll need this, that, and the other, right? Okay, at Mediacorp, I will share that part of the investment has really been in upskilling. And it's upskilling our teams who handle marketing or handle the experience in how to look at, read, and create new data fields. Right? Mm-hmm. So I want to encourage everyone to also think about the human capital aspect of this, that not everything is a machine or a system that you need to invest behind. Very often it's about a skill level. You probably already have the data or the signals within your system. Now, do you have the people who can read those signals and create a storyline for you?
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. It's not like you can buy a big technology solution and it will solve your omnichannel needs. There are solutions which will facilitate it, but where you can start off is with your people, and ensuring that you actually answer some of these questions and put consumer first. Yeah. So we can go on to the next slide, where we look at, I think a lot of times when we talk to our clients, what they're most curious about is what other clients are facing. Like, what are challenges? Am I alone in this? Is it just us as a brand that is facing this? And I think no, a lot of the challenges that everyone is facing are universal challenges. And they're definitely, this is not the easiest thing, and it's also something that everyone has had to pivot to fairly fast. Again, I mentioned, it's not that we all went on this journey because of just general digital adoption, the maturity of certain platforms, the ability to do some of these things that we weren't able to before. But COVID really, catalyzed the speed of how much adoption had to take place quickly. And not just take place quickly, take place in a situation where we all were working from home, or people are in different places. We didn't have the luxury of being in a room and where you could brainstorm and really hash things out. So and we've all, I think, also now gotten really good at having these conversations on Zoom and having a chat. And it's I would say, where this is the world we live in. But I think the reassurance that I think we wanted to also share is that not everyone, even for brands very mature, they're not there yet, or they don't feel like they're there yet, and it's a constant improvement. So challenges that everyone seems to feel is really understanding that consumer journey. And I think a lot of brands are like, I might have understood my consumer journey 5 years ago, but are my consumers the same place or doing the same thing they are now? So there's a lot of second guessing also of like, I'm not sure and clear where my consumers are. So I think they're spending a little bit of time to also understand what your consumer is now doing and having maybe a little pulse check or check now and then is also something that we have realized needs to happen, because with the world going to this hybrid scheme, we're seeing, and I think Mediacorp had a really good example and a data point, and that is they know their consumer and they can track it across these many channels. And you can see that instead of certain peaks that we used to see also, like we see that in media, we see in media consumption, we are no longer seeing those peaks. We're seeing it a lot more. People have the flexibility of using their time differently. And so the way they interact. So the times in which they interact maybe might not be as clear now, but the touch points still remain there. So I think that is the thing which we can all take away from. And I think it's one which brands can just go and, sense check along the way and just understand also where their consumers are and how they're progressing.
Yeah, actually, Penelope, I want to encourage everyone, because I think the Mediacorp story is one that I'm very inspired to share, because I've been around for like 5 years now. And, when I first joined, it was all about TV, radio, right? But now our thinking really is, we don't care about the platform, we care about the content. So as long as we're serving up the content, in a spot that the consumer wants to consume our content, we've ticked the box, right? And that has actually led to a renaissance of sorts, at Caldecott Hill, and that's great. So, where the box that resonates most with me really is ineffective content strategy, right? We clearly had an ineffective content strategy, but there was no way, because, our business is really about, serving something up to the audience that the audience wants to watch, because clients like all of you in the room expect us to have that audience in order that you can touch them with your message, right? So, we were hemmed in on both sides, and clearly by doing omnichannel and by thinking that way and really kind of go, there's no sacred cow. We're prepared to forego certain more traditional platforms and go where the audience is. Now that has led to that switch, and I encourage all of you to do it. It was scary, but it's been the most energizing experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, and absolutely. I think that's a great one to segue into, actually, ineffective content strategy, and really looking at what are you providing? Is this interesting to your consumer? And is this relevant for them? And if you need to flip it on its head, then you might just need to flip it on its head. But it's more about communicating what your brand wants your consumer to be able to interact with. And if that's not working, then not being precious with it. And then, of course, difficulty in aligning business objectives with media strategy. I think that has always been a question. How do I commit to a certain budget and yet, not be able to show results for it, because, we need to be able to, as every business is pressured, you have to show results. I think that is something which is a challenge, but there are ways around it. And there are definitely ways, and we'll talk at the end of this about setting out measurement metrics. So I think knowing that the consumer is now at the center, making sure that you align your objectives now with the consumer and your media is really where you will start to connect those dots. Improper utilization of user consumer data. Oh, we are awash in data. There's more data than we know what to do with now. And it's also very trendy. Everyone wants to talk about data. It is important. It is not that it's not important, but I think really picking out what is the most important to your brand and about the consumer, because again, you're looking at how can I move this consumer through understanding of my brand or my advertising message, and actually then engage with them and have them come back to me. So really looking at that and cutting out from, I guess, what is all that noise, what is signal for you. And then, of course, implementation of wherever there is a failure or an issue. So not everything will work the first time. And I think in some, Silicon Valley circles, they want to break it quickly so that, they can fix it and they can move on. I think Even the really big brands have tried things and maybe that it's not the right exact fit for their consumer, but move on, implement a fix to that failure or that issue and move on. Don't be afraid of that failure and that cause, decision paralysis. And then, of course, not setting goals and measuring performance at every stage, because I think while it is something which you have to change and pivot your measurement metrics and your structures, by also foregoing that, you also miss out a big opportunity to show your successes because you want to build on those successes and do bigger and better. And what is working for your brand, you start to realize. And you can leverage on that and extend that to the rest of not just your product, but maybe your engagements or other channels. Because now remember, you're talking about a single consumer, but you're just meeting them in different spaces. It's like meeting the same group of friends in a coffee shop, meeting the same group of friends in a movie theater, but they're the same group of people and you want to continue that interaction with them. You want to pick up on conversations you have maybe left off seamlessly. And then what big challenge I think that advertisers face also is isolated analytics and measurement. Every tech that they have acquired along the way, every platform that they have engaged with is being measured separately and independently of each other. So that I think is something which can be resolved once you know it. And then of course, tech and processes do not allow for action on new findings. Being again pigeonholed into one thing and not taking that action, very similar to implementation failures or issues. If you're paralyzed by that, then that becomes a challenge. And then of course, the last one is how do I then retain customers? I work so hard to attract people. I've worked so hard to get consumers to interact with me. How do I now retain them? Well, I think that's part of your content strategy and really engaging with your consumer, getting to know them, getting them to continue to interact with you such that it is a long lifetime engagement and not just a one-off, hit and run. We can go to the next slide. So basically, this section will kind of end off with 6 principles to keep in mind when adopting an omni-channel approach. And really it's starting from clearly mapping your consumer journey, understanding really what the touch points for each state of the journey are. Are these touch points going to affect your awareness, conversion, retention, or advocacy? And how you want to actually communicate about your brand at each of these times. Your channels now must communicate. So when we say communicate, they need not be connected per se, but when consumers switch between channels, they shouldn't, for some reason, be needing to start over again. Obviously, there are some offline channels and online channels which they will interact with, but the total interaction that people have with the brand should be seamless. They should still be able to go to a store and return something that they bought online or vice versa. So things like that. You need to really redefine or define what the role of your offline shops are. If you're a type of business that does have brick and mortar stores, they are not going to disappear. People still exist in real life. And as we saw, it wasn't from the poll, it wasn't that people no longer shop offline. People still do want to touch things, feel things, look at things. So determine actually how your store will actually behave as part of the omni-channel journey. Is this going to be last mile fulfillment? Is this a hybrid, or is this purely a dark store? So we talk about also digital must be frictionless whenever, and all of us have encountered this when we want to purchase something and something fails, or we get an error message. So again, it's not to give up at this stage, it is to fix the problem fast and to move on so that the consumer feels like this is something which is taking their suggestions or how they are interacting with your brand seriously. And of course, multiple delivery and pickup options, people want convenience, and stock availability must be visible. So this pretty much gives you 6 principles to keep in mind when adopting the approach. We have a little bit of facts and figures, as well as a Sephora kind of case study that we're going to show in a video, and we can show that so everyone can take a look. So again, if people have questions, feel free to ask the questions in the chat.
I am sure everyone is right now taking photos. But don't worry, everyone. There will be a recording of this webinar, so you can always revisit it on our website. Really good information on the video.
At Sephora, IT is really at the table as far as why we do things.
You look at Sephora, and we are not considered a traditional retailer. From an IT perspective, we are a digital innovator, a leading edge retailer in technology and beauty.
When you go in the store, you can do things like Color IQ. Even using mobile, you can do virtual lab try-on.
We've truly invested in retail technology centered around the client experience. Everything we do is for our clients.
For me means it's a culture and a mindset of creativity and experimentation. It means we're not scared to push the boundaries.
The retail industry has been through such a transformation over the past decade.
Sephora is doing everything they can to kind of integrate technology and put that into the stores and bring that digital experience that we know the client loves and shape that experience for them with tools that they're familiar with.
We're also fundamentally obsessed with the client. We're obsessed with her.
We're always thinking about what does she want, what are her needs, what are her concerns, and how can we make beauty fun and easy and uncomplicated. And one way that we've done that very successfully is with Sephora Virtual Artist. This is such a fun way for clients to try on all sorts of different makeup, and we know that she loves it. Even our CEO loves it.
This is Sephora's Virtual Artist, and we're going to try on some makeup virtually and then see how it looks in real life. So the nice thing about this is you can try all kinds of different things without actually putting anything on your face. You can see I have some makeup on my face right now, but I can look in the screen here and it's like I'm wearing totally different makeup, which is pretty cool. You can do a little kiss and make it change colors. That's one of the features here. There it goes. Whoa, oh my God. That's pretty purple. So see.
Here you can see Sephora's use of combining Facebook Messenger with augmented reality chatbots, so consumers can experiment with different looks. Users can also make purchases directly from the app or share looks with their friends to get their opinions before they make their final purchases. Combining technology, social media, and in-store talent, Sephora is working hard to give consumers the ultimate omnichannel experience.
People posting pictures of themselves and their makeup and asking questions. Is there something particular about the beauty community that this is like sort of sales gold for you?
It is. So makeup has always been a natural conversation for women over the ages. Women can talk about makeup in the ladies' room, in a bar, anywhere they are. And so women really come together and bond over makeup, and especially at Sephora, which is such an open cell environment where women can speak actually and talk to each other and our experts in the stores.
So how do you actually translate it into sales?
So what we have found is that our clients actually love creating these beautiful looks and sharing them online. And they were doing that on Instagram. They were sharing them with us on Beauty Talk, which is our beauty community. And what we found was the #1 question that people would ask is, what are all the products that you use, not just maybe that one hero product? And you can't really do that on a lot of social media platforms. And so we created the ability for a client to upload her own photo and tag every product that she used, which might be 10 products. And that way she can actually show someone how to create that look. Mobile has been such an instrument to clients have their mobile phone and they have their photos that they can upload so easily, and now they can tag those products. So we've actually seen over 60% of our views on mobile and over 45% of the photos that are uploaded from mobile devices.
Combining technology in-store and online, Sephora has not only created a seamless omni-channel experience for consumers, it's also created a community for them to interact with one another. Whether you're shopping looks from one of their Instagram posts to purchase directly, or using the in-app virtual artist to find your next look, one thing is for sure, Sephora has incorporated technology in such a unique way that it actually feels thoughtful and personal to the consumer. Sephora has definitely set the bar high for omni-channel retailing.
All right, so that gives us basically three major reasons why some brands succeed over others. And really, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat that actually are very, very relevant for this. And so one of them, which I'm going to read out aloud, is: what if the product you're selling requires a longer time for decision-making due to higher costs or greater commitment needed? For example, buying a house or an educational program, how do you suggest we can leverage the omni-channel communication? So really, I think this slide gives us kind of an example of understanding what works and setting realistic expectations. So just like any other FMCG where you might have all your content ready, you have everything, you understand where your consumer journey is. Same for a high touch or a long lead time type of product. You will need to understand where your consumer is finding that information or about your product or engages with your brand. So determining also then what your consumer journey is and what is the content that is relevant for each part of that consumer journey. So the difference between an FMCG then would be you are constantly putting this out because that information you have to constantly remind, because people might buy this at any given time. There's always a certain percentage of the audience that's in market for this product. But for these high touch, big ticket items, so cars, houses, university, you need to be a little bit more sensitive to then what is the trigger to that information. The content is still the same that you would provide for that particular part of the purchase funnel or the time of the interaction that your consumer might have, but you might now not have the luxury to be always on or always on in a similar way that FMCG is. You would be always on, but being more cognizant of the triggers to when someone is looking for this information. So what is maybe a critical channel that you might find that you would be in such a situation would be search, where a consumer is actually putting out that question to the universe and saying, I would like to find out more about educational programs, an MBA, for example. And then you are ready because you already have a search campaign, your ad comes to the top and you start that conversation. So yes, there are ways, it is similar, but it is also understanding very much that your product is a high touch or a long, over a long period of time, you need to interact with your audience.
Yes, actually, so, I've got something to add on that. We've done the Singapore Property Show. I mean, we went virtual about 2 years ago with the pandemic, because properties still need to be sold. And well, clearly before the cooling measures, right, the properties were flying off the shelves. So we definitely had a role where the decision-making was very, very short. And it was all about getting the product in front of the client as quick as possible across multiple channels. But clearly with the cooling measures, we now have had to completely change the omni-channel approach to the property show. So it no longer is, do a property show one weekend and expect sales to roll. It won't be. It will be a case of using a property show to thaw the audience, get them thinking, and then to engage them for almost 6 months, because the 6 months is the decision-making process time that we know that they will need at this, once the rules change. So there's a lot of that flexing that needs to happen. I think there's something that has come up also. Now, Penelope's been great about talking about an omnichannel approach to your target audience, right? And I think she's talking about multiple touch points, including the point of sale, right? And I think that from the questions, I think there is a differentiation to be made between omnichannel communications, which is I think something that I'm representing Mediacorp and more prepared to talk about. And what I'll talk about in that space is actually a subset of what Penelope is talking about, which is that while you've got your omnichannel communications down, it doesn't solve your problem because you still need to make sure that your other consumer touch points are aligned, right, with that communications plan that you put out.
Yep. So they're all important. Exactly. So they're absolutely important. So all your paid, owned, as well as what you might earn is definitely important, and they work together. I think ideally we don't think that you can only rely on owned. You must also have paid. And that was, I think, Catherine has a question about how accurate are mainstream media readership and viewership numbers.
Well, I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that.
Yes.
Okay.
So we actually say that yes, they are accurate. They are these syndicated numbers are audited, and they are they're absolutely they're verified, and there's a very robust methodology which Dasheng will
I'll show more of that in the next section.
Yeah. So we also rely on these audited numbers, and that's why we rely on and your media agency media partners that you work with will also provide these audited numbers for you and based on syndicated research. Social media unique views tracking, these are within your walled gardens who are reporting numbers that they have. There are ways to, if you have concerns about whether these are accurate, there are ways that you can employ for some platforms certain degree of third-party tracking. But by and large, for I would say the responsible media partners, they are absolutely audited circulation numbers. So anyway, so the big three things which make brands successful, and I think what we also wanted to touch on, understand what works and setting realistic expectations. This goes for also your channels that you purchase, would be determining the value that you want out of this, right? Where is the value going to be? And make sure that you also understand what your brand wants to achieve in 3 years and work with your partners on them. Be upfront and actually share with your partners. This is where we would like to go in 3 years, and how do you shift that needle? Because I think when we're starting to look at this omni-channel approach, it is no longer about incremental gains. Also, you're trying to also move a big needle across many, many years. And then, of course, working across the organization, you are no longer, it's no longer just about marketing, working with marketing. Marketing is now working with IT, is working with fulfillment, logistics, sometimes even, and understanding the corresponding tech capabilities will need to be prioritized. We can go to the next slide, please. And of course, I think everyone wants to know then how can success be quantified? So we really think that you need to measure effectiveness of the strategy versus only looking at short-term efficiency of individual channels. So we don't say you don't look at efficiency, you absolutely have to. I think that is table stakes for most media planners. And they will be looking at really individual channels. So analyze the whole campaign in total. So if we're looking at the funnel, what we're looking at is how do you view that overall campaign performance goal? What is it that you're actually trying to get out of the overall campaign? And then ensure, of course, every single touch point is accounted for and that you have a rigorous and very clear measurement setup. And then track performance of every channel against benchmarks, know which I've performed well and which ones require attention. So constantly be in the mindset to optimize and to actually work within that, but without having that overall holistic view. You don't want to take each performance in isolation and undervalue its worth or its contribution to the overall omnichannel approach. So what platforms would I consider must-haves that are central to omnichannel marketing? With the consumer at the center, then how do you market different consumer groups concurrently? So I think once we break down our audience into how they interact with the touch points throughout the marketing funnel, I think this becomes a lot clearer which are the touch points which are working and which then are contributing most. So platforms that we consider, we can go to the next slide, please. This actually gives you a hint of the platforms. We definitely in omnichannel would have some form of offline and some sort of online channel. And just having 2 channels itself would already give you incremental benefit than only one single channel. So we would say it is not, only one, it's omnichannel is not all about digital. It is not necessarily about that. Digital is an important part and is one of many channels. But we would say that you always want to include at least a second channel, if not 3 or more, depending on what you are able to and what is relevant for your brand and where your consumers are. But having these multiple channels, and I think Dasheng will share more on it, are definitely critical to success. So the consumer-focused metrics to deliver that holistic view, and where you're looking at really the ROI or the ROAS is for most e-commerce clients, is looking at not just the metrics by channel on the left, but now metrics for a holistic view. Don't forget looking at what is, because the customer is at the center now, the consumer is the one that you want to understand, looking at where the customer is satisfied. So you don't need an elaborate tool or a tech about this. You can even send out consumer surveys. Understand, is your consumer happy or what their sentiment is. Then there's of course other things which you can get like brand lift scores, net promoter scores. And then of course you want to track purchase frequency and, customer lifetime value. So this is where that becomes a very important metric for omnichannel. And then the last is we're just leaving off with 4 major questions really that when you want to set up a measurement framework that we think that most brands should go into. And it's like, what will you measure? Being very clear with your team, as well as the other teams who didn't used to be part of the marketing ecosystem that now also will be part of this. And then how often will you measure? Who will measure it and own the data? So is this measured by marketing only or IT? And what action can you take with that data? Is this something that you can improve, or is once you collect that data, nothing happens with it? Because then we would also question, is this purposeful data collection? And that pretty much, I think, is in a nutshell.
Thank you, Penelope. Now, all of you, when you're looking at what Penelope is sharing, I think the worst thing to do is to look at it as a checklist of everything that you want. It's not, right? It's a buffet table. And please use your knowledge of your business to go through and find out which aspects are of priority to you. Because trust me, I've seen it happen, something called analysis paralysis. Where you're constantly saying that you need to do something when actually you already have the tools to get at least some things done, right? So the economy is recovering and everything, the whole world's going a little bit crazy right now. So the truth is, don't focus on what you don't have, focus on what you have, and then prioritize what you don't have and then add them. So next slide. Want to say that, okay, I had 2 case studies, but for time's sake, I'm going to share one, which I think is quite fun. Now, over the last 2 years, our clients have come to us to say, hey, we're stuck in this whole thing. What are new models that we can do, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing that we've gone to them to say is, let us help you take care of your omni-channel communications and then build these synergistic collaborations. And when I say that, it's that we've actually managed to get clients to share data with us dynamically. And that dynamic data sharing has actually allowed us to optimize their communication channels and their ROI. So back to Catherine's question, how accurate is mainstream media tracking? It is actually quite accurate. I would say the only platform that I don't have live data for is radio. That's the only platform. Every other platform, be it TV, etc., I have live data for, right? So so you can trust that. So next slide. Now, as you can see, this is not the Mediacorp that your parents or your grandparents knew, right? We are this huge network now where we reach 96% of Singapore, and that's like 4.5 million, a week, okay? And not only your TV stations, radio stations, that even that number has increased, but look at our digital network where we have multiple partners, including YouTube. right? And I want to also show you, this is where all our investment has gone behind. And this is a proof to say we're deep in this omni-channel push, right? Because that's what our clients want. We didn't do this because it was fun. We did this because it was a necessity, okay? And when you look at Bloomer.sg, the celebrity agency, and Social Hub, right there, we're talking about more than 110 million followers across 500 social media accounts, which we can activate as well. Okay, so how did we activate this? Next slide, please. I want to show you this case study. Jade, play.
Mmm, cheesy.
Oh, cheesy. Words can't describe the new Cheesy 7 Grilled Chicken Pizza by Pizza Hut with 7 amazing cheeses plus cream cheese. So mouth-watering, it will leave you craving for more. Cheese! Also available in Cheesy 7 Original and Hawaiian. Use promo code SGPDay56 to get 56% off 2 Cheesy 7 pizzas. Order now at pizzahut.com.sg.
You know, very often, coming from a background in marketing, you don't want to do that cheesy commercial, but sometimes cheesy really does work and cut through. Now, this is Pizza Hut. Pizza Hut has been a client of ours and a partner of ours for many, many years. And clearly, over the last 2 years, they've faced their set of challenges. So we actually worked together to say, you know, hey, if you would actually give us access to your different channel data, whether it be takeaway or in-store or whatever, if we knew that data, we could fuse for you and create an omni-channel marketing plan, communications plan for you. So what you heard was radio. Radio took the lead. We went in, this was a 8-week campaign. As you can see, we tracked to the consumer, meaning morning, we want to start getting them to think about lunch, what they're going to have at lunch. So that's really digital and socials, some TV, and radio was a big part of it. By the time late morning came around, it was really to say, hey, you've thought about it, now you're going to have it for lunch. So digital and socials and radio, and afternoon and evening and so forth, right? So as a result of us mapping this out for them over 8 weeks, and because we shared the data back and forth, we were able to dynamically tweak the campaign while in flight in order to achieve the efficiencies. Now, the great thing I want to say about this is that when they came into this, they were like, okay, we're prepared to try this, and we want to do it around our tentpole product called Cheesy 7. Now, Cheesy 7 is their biggest product of the year, okay? Now, what happened next was what really put us into a tailspin. Next, play the video.
Yes.
Literally, they ran out of cheese.
Sold out.
Right? The Pizza Hut did not realize the impact that we could have on optimizing their omni-channel communications plan, that within 3 weeks, all the cheese that they had planned in storage for 8 weeks had run out. So the results were 4 times sold out within the first 2 weeks, 56% growth in app daily downloads. Now, for those of you who have an app, you know how important that is to get the app daily downloads, because that creates another very dynamic channel for you to use. 8% growth in delivery and takeaway sales because we optimized to the day parts. And then, as Penelope had said earlier, search. Now, 44% growth in search activity. You might have a search campaign, but you still need search drivers. Right? So when you look at this omni-channel activation, there was this question about which platform is a must-have, right? It's different for each different category of product, right? I would say in this case, radio was key because we know that the results that we drove in radio, it was very, very clear. Radio supported by digital always works for this sort of a product line. Social was to give it talkability across time. Social was a great place to talk about the fact that we ran out of cheese, for example. TV is important because clearly you need the food porn. You need to see the pizza. You need to see the melting cheese, right? So each one was used for a different purpose. Now, if you would ask me generically across all campaigns, which platform would I say is a must-have? I really think that mobile, any sort of mobile-driven platform or asset is tremendously important. I think if you put mobile front and like in the middle of the pot and have everything built off it, you can't go wrong. So mobile would be my #1 platform. It's a must-have. Okay, so with this, I want to say, I've come to a closing slide. So really, you know, coming together is the beginning, and the coming together would be coming together with your team, coming together with the different groups within your organization to kind of think out the consumer journey. That's important. Coming together with like-minded partners or partners who can bring, you know, special sauce to the mix. That's important. Keeping it together is progress, but working together is the success, right? And our successes over the last year, whether it be with Lazada or Shopee or Pizza Hut, and currently with KFC, all the big brands, you know, it really is that working together and being very open in sharing this data that I think has driven those efficiencies and have driven those huge lifts that I had shared. Right. So on that note, we are really running, we've run way over, but so many of you have stayed with us to this point. I think we have no open questions left. So Penelope and myself, I think we can give ourselves a pat on the back for getting those questions out. I want all of you to pull out your phone right now and, you know, scan this QR code. You know, we've become so good at scanning QR code because the upcoming webinar, although one, not in collaboration with AAMS, but I think this is a critical, important webinar to attend, understanding how collecting and building first-party data will future-proof your business. This is a tremendously hot topic. We've got really hot speakers, Stefan, Jennifer, and one other speaker who's just confirmed yesterday that we're waiting for the confirmation from a very big data player in town. I think this is an unmissable webinar, so please go ahead and scan. And at this point, I am going to hand over to Christopher, who I promised was going to share a little gift for all of us. Okay, so over to you, Christopher.
All right, thank you, Dasheng. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris, and I represent the Association of Advertising and Marketing Singapore, or AAMS, the trade association for the ad marcom sector. Now, earlier, Dasheng mentioned the importance of upscaling of human capital for this to navigate this omni-channel landscape. Now, at AAMS, we offer government-funded courses that focus on the fundamentals of digital marketing for new hires in your company. Your new hires can be registered in our 6-month Career Conversion Program, or CCP class modules. Eligible employees may receive 70% course fee funding and up to 90% of salary support for up to a year. Now, the topics you see on the screen is what we have currently, and we'll be rolling out new modules in the coming months. AAMS, we also have a lot of other initiatives, competitions, and training sessions that we organize. We've also just launched a guide on best practices for pitching, and it's available for free. So as you can see, there are lots of areas in the ad marcom sector that we can work together with you on. So please feel free to drop me an email at ccp@aams.org.sg if you are keen to find out more. All the other details on the screen, or you can come to our website, aams.org.sg, to find out more. Thank you, everyone, for your time, and I return you to Dasheng's capable hands.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, just thank you, everyone, for coming and returning, being with us this morning. Just bear in mind that a link to the recording, the video, will be made available to all of you. I'm sure all of you want to go through Penelope's video one more time. I know I personally will be. Lots of good fodder in there, especially for us marketing professionals to justify our plans for the year, justify our strategy, be inspired on new ways to engage as we come out of recovery and in this, like I said, this crazy world. I think we're all on tenterhooks, but you know, we pray for a really great 2022. Thank you so much for coming. And on that note, thank you so much, Penelope. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. I'm Dasheng from Mediacorp. We're here to be your partner. And on that note, we will all sign off. Thank you for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.